Breaking news now. The road to peace in Ukraine lies beyond the neocon disaster. The 30-year neocon disaster in Ukraine is finally coming to a close. The neocon plan to use NATO to encircle Russia around the Black Sea has been a dismal failure. The world's peace, security, and prosperity greatly depend on the choices the United States and Russia make right now. There were 4 events that dashed neocon hopes for NATO expansion eastward to include Ukraine, Georgia, and beyond. The first is straightforward. Ukraine has suffered tragic and appalling losses on the battlefield. The neocons and mainstream media continue to ignore the obvious fact that Russia is winning the war of attrition. The second factor is the waning backing for the US neocon strategy in Europe. Poland and Ukraine are no longer in communication. Hungary's stance against neocons is long-standing. An anti-neoconservative majority has taken power in Slovakia. The majority of Europeans disapprove of EU leaders like Macron, Meloni, Sanchez, Scholz, and Sunak. Third, the United States has reduced the funding it provides to Ukraine. The Republican Party grassroots, several Republican presidential candidates, and a growing number of Republican members of Congress oppose more spending on Ukraine. A potential Russian offensive is the fourth and, from Ukraine's perspective, the most pressing of these threats. There have been hundreds of thousands of casualties in Ukraine, and the country has used up all of its artillery, air defenses, tanks, and other heavy weapons. After that, we can expect a major Russian offensive. Ukraine is on the verge of demographic, economic, and military disaster. Is there anything the U.S. government can do to prevent a catastrophe? It needs to immediately adjust its course. While stuck in its imperial fantasies of the 19th century, Britain now advises the United States to escalate. The U.S. neocons can't help but act imperialistic. Reasonable people must quickly prevail. Vice President Joe Biden should tell Russian President Vladimir Putin that if the United States and Russia come to a new agreement on security arrangements, the United States will end NATO enlargement eastward. President Putin proposed a security arrangement on December 17, 2021, and Biden should agree to negotiate something along those lines. Biden foolishly refused to negotiate with Putin in December 2021. It's time to sit down and talk terms. A consensus can be reached through the use of these 4 factors. First, as part of an agreement, Biden should agree that NATO will not enlarge eastward, but not reverse the past NATO enlargement. If Russia were to invade an existing NATO member, NATO would not stand for it. Second, the new pact should include nuclear weapons. Tensions are extremely high due to the United States' unilateral withdrawal from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty in 2002, the deployment of Aegis missiles to Poland and Romania in 2016, the United States' withdrawal from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces (INF) agreement in 2019, and Russia's suspension of the New START Treaty in 2023. Finally, Russia and Ukraine would settle on new borders, with Russian-majority Crimea and Russian-majority parts of eastern Ukraine remaining in Russia. Ukraine would receive security guarantees backed by the United Nations Security Council and major powers like Germany, Turkey, and India if the borders were to be redrawn. Fourth, business, finance, cultural, and tourism ties between the United States, Russia, and the European Union would be revived. It's high time for Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky to make a comeback in concert halls across the United States and Europe. Russia, Ukraine, or the United States would be challenging the international community if they subsequently violated the new agreement. It is true, as JFK pointed out, that even the most hostile nations can be relied upon to accept and keep those treaty obligations, and only those treaty obligations, which are in their own interest. Neocons carry much blame for undermining Ukraine's 1991 borders. After US-backed coup d'état in Ukraine against Viktor Yanukovych in 2014, Russia claimed Crimea. Nor did Russia annex the Donbass after 2014, instead calling on Ukraine to honor the UN-backed Minsk II agreement promising autonomy to the Donbass. Instead of granting the Donbass autonomy, the neocons favored arming Ukraine to forcibly retake the region. Collective security, as advocated for by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, is essential to ensuring Europe's long-term stability and peace. In accordance with OSCE commitments, member states will not strengthen their security at the expense of the security of other states. Professor at Columbia and author of To Move the World: JFK's Quest for Peace, published by Random House in 2013, Jeffrey D. Sachs is a man who has made a difference.